Hey guys, just a quick disclaimer before you listen to the podcast. We did have a couple of network issues during the recording, which interrupted some of the conversation at times, but I hope you can enjoy the podcast anyway, and we'll make sure to clean up that for the next episode. Boom, and we are live with episode 2 of the Tempo Shift podcast. And once again, I have a very special guest with me. He is an Overwatch veteran, someone who's been around the scene. He's worn a lot of hats. He's been on several successful contenders teams. He's walked the Path2Pro. He's been a caster. He's been a podcast host. Basically, he's done a lot of things, and most recently, he's known as the Slayer of NYXL, being part of the only team who has actually beaten the Korean giant not once but twice this regular season. How are you doing, Dogman?
I'm good, thanks, Minimal. That was an intense introduction, man. I like it. Thank you.
No problem. So, what's going on with, I guess, in the Atlanta rain camp now that the mid-season break is kind of winding down? What's the mood like? What are you guys doing to prepare for the rest of the season? How has the mid-season break been? What's going on in your camp?
Yeah, we're just starting up scrims. I during the mid-season break had All-Stars, so it was like a mixture of like I don't know. It's just like All-Star break was like right in the middle of where my break was supposed to be, so I had to like adjust what I did with my break, I guess. But we started scrimming pretty recently, and we didn't take too much time off since we wanted to get back immediately and stay on the rise because some other teams are still on. I think some other teams are still on a break. I could be wrong, but I think people are at least just getting back now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we're getting back into scrims and getting back in the swing of things, I guess, kinda.
That's interesting, actually, that you mentioned All Stars, because I had forgotten about that event a little bit. Because kind of going into it, like, I didn't have much of an interest in it. It felt like, well, just let the guys take a longer break. It felt sort of like a pesky event that you should kind of get over with. But then when I watched it, it was actually quite fun. What was it like sort of being part of the event?
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, it's like, yeah, I guess like you're talking about the NBA before the podcast. Like
Mm-hmm.
All-Star break in the NBA compared to Overwatch is like kind of a joke.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing is definitely like World Cup and stuff like that. Like those are like the prestigious events that happen in Overwatch. But All-Star break was fun. I mean, we got to do really whatever we wanted. We could like walk through. We could chill behind people's cameras if we wanted to and troll them or support them or whatever. And then the back, you like during the dugout area, you saw the Korean players and all of NYXL and stuff like that. So that was fun, especially because I was in Overwatch League last year, so it was cool to more or less idolize those players last year. So I don't know, it's just fun to see them back there. I think Pavane said I was better than Jonak at one point, so I'll
Nice,
take it.
nice, nice. Well, I mean, and that's the interesting thing. Like you mentioned, you weren't part of the league last year. You just you're what I would sort of classify as a veteran rookie, because you have been around. You feel like a veteran, but you're sort of making your debut season. So before we kind of talk about the Atlanta Reign and your season so far, I'm sort of very interested in kind of talking through your path to pro and looking at it from different angles, especially from in the sense that I think nowadays when we look at the tier 2 scene, it feels like a lot of players are trying to speed run to the Overwatch League. It feels like anyone who has a little bit of short-term success, they feel like they're almost entitled to making the league. Whereas I think back in the day when I was coming up, when you were coming up, we really didn't, there was no six-figure contract waiting on the other end if you became the best player in the world. We were just kind of doing it out of passion. We were, I know that I sacrificed relationships, friendships, job security, everything. And I know from reading on your story, and everyone who's read your story, everyone knows that you did that as well, being thrown out of your house by your parents, sacrificing everything, really just putting your life on hold to pursue this one dream. And and I think the mentality's kind of changed a little bit. Do you feel like you're sort of better for it, having gone through those trenches? And what do you think about kind of the mentality in tier 2 right now? Do you think they can learn something from kind of the way you approached your journey?
Yeah, I mean, we might both have the what is it, the gaming addiction, but the disease or whatever that the health or
Yeah, exactly.
but yeah, I don't know. I think over everything. I mean, yeah, I think it made me a better person. I mean, I'm not that old too for being a veteran too. I'm 20.
Yeah.
So people think I'm older. I know when Fry came on the team, he thought I was like a lot older than I am. So I mean, yeah, I've been around since the start just because I wanted to go pro. That was like the whole reason I played Overwatch because when I was in high school, I was just like nonstop gaming, like playing Counter Strike and all these. I was playing games to go professional, and then pretty much I was like trying to find a game to go pro in before I was like 18, pretty much. And then Overwatch came out right when I was 18. So sorry. Basically, I just grinded Overwatch, and um, I think that the difference between now tier two and back then is that the line between tier two and one like wasn't so well drawn. Like you could play and you could scrim against tier one teams if you were good, right? But now if you're a contenders team and you're good, the only real like chance you have to scrim an out team is probably your sister team, right? Um, so I don't know. I think that the what people need to get over and need to realize in the tier two scene is that you might not go into Overwatch League, and that really shouldn't matter. The biggest thing that matters is like just being good enough to get in the Overwatch League, or just being good enough in general, just being a good player. Because if you have your sights focused too much on getting Overwatch League, then you know you'll be just disappointed constantly. Because for the most part, you probably won't get an Overwatch League, and as long as you have that mindset that you won't get an Overwatch League until you like, I don't know, just prove it to yourself that you're actually a good player, then um,
Mhm.
you just won't. So that was my biggest thing. I just changed my mentality. Just like, cause I've been disappointed like many a times, like not getting on good teams or you know not getting in the Overwatch League in the first place. So I mean, it just takes like those experiences to realize that you need to go after a different goal, I guess.
Hmm. And I mean, you've been very consistent in kind of having that mentality. You've constantly said that there were several times during which you were asked, do you want to be in the league or whatever, and you were like, I don't feel like I'm ready there. I'm not. I don't think I'm ready. I don't think I'm there as a player yet to make the jump. And I think if you look at last season, I think as evidenced by last season, there were a lot of players I think who kind of made the league ahead of schedule, if that makes sense. I think they came in and they were not ready for the pressure, for everything that comes with being part of the league, and they kind of fizzled out, and then they end up kind of being forgotten and having short careers. Whereas I think when you come in, you have gone through the trenches, you have sort of, I guess, a calloused mind in a way where you won't be easily broken by the pressure of the league, I suppose. And I think something that also I think a lot of people who are in contenders don't understand is that it's very important that you find the right team when you make the jump up. You go into a team where you're gonna have a chance to fight for the starting spot. You're not just gonna sit on the bench behind someone, collect your paycheck, but not really get a chance to show what you're capable of, because that's the thing when you kind of degrade a little bit as a player, and again, that's not good for the longevity of your career. So I think it's super important for players to kind of have that mindset, to not rush into the league. Make sure it's the right situation, make sure you're ready, make sure you come in and like, I'm ready to make this team better and make it impact, and that's why I'm coming over, and like that's your primary reason. Do you think there's anything to it, that you think if you made the league a little earlier than you did now, that you might have had worse of an outlook on the season in your career?
I'm not sure. I mean, right now, like coming into the league with goats, I think it was generally easier to I guess not stand out as a Zen player, but it's generally like better for Zen players right now. Um, and I think with the past, with also no replays and stuff like that, and last season, I mean, I probably could have gotten away with it if I was like decent, because I think even during that time, I was still like on good teams and stuff like that. Like, this isn't public or anything like that, or I mean, on any Wikipedias or whatever. But I was on a team, so Toronto Esports,
Mm-hmm.
right? The old team.
Yeah.
I was on that team with Moth, Nero, Dalton, Pinker, and Kraken Lakin, and we were that team for like 6 months. before like contenders happened, and we were just absolutely dominating the tier 2 scene. So I mean, personally, I think if I made Overwatch League then, and my mindset probably would be different because like I really wanted to get an Overwatch League at the time, and I felt entitled.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I mean, maybe that could have cut my career short if I had the wrong mindset or whatever. Um, but I don't feel like the competition was maybe that strong in season 1, and then on top of that, I think that it also meant that I don't know, the meta on top of the no replays I think would have gave me the benefit of the doubt
Mm-hmm.
because no one could have watched my POV if they wanted to or whatever. So how could they know if I'm good or bad?
Mm-hmm.
And especially as a Zen player in the metas that were in stage 1, there's not like anything you could do besides stats to stand out really.
Yeah. So something I'm also was curious about because when I was kind of preparing for this podcast, I read some interviews that you did, and something you also mentioned, sort of on your way, in your path to pro, so to speak, was that there were some opportunities in the past that you kind of lost out or you were removed from teams because you were a bad teammate, and that's, I think, a very interesting topic to discuss as well, because I think everyone focuses on aim, on mechanical skill, and comms, and all of these things. But I think one of the most underrated skills, and one of the things that I think teams are going to be much more deliberate and careful when they evaluate players in the future, is how does this player function in the team? Is he a good teammate? And I think that's something you can only learn through being on a team for an extended period of time. And to share like a personal story from my career, it's something I also learned pretty early when I was on Luminosity, and during that time when we were kind of performing below expectations. We had one of those meetings when we all sit down and kind of lay everything on the table, if whatever's frustrating us, whatever we can change to get better. And something that kind of a feedback that I got from my teammates was that they kind of agreed with my shot call and the things that I said, but sometimes I would say it in a negative tone, especially when we were losing. I would say it in a negative tone, so they would be distracted and think about the tone and be frustrated at the tone rather than the context of what I was saying. And that's that type of situation where if you're a new to the role, new to the leadership role, you can either put the ego aside and improve and go like, okay, I'm failing as a captain because if my players are feeling these frustrations in game, that means they're not performing to their full potential, and I'm detracting from my team, despite of how good my play is in the server, right? Or at the same time, you can let your ego get the best of you, and you can be removed from the team, and your career can fizzle out, and I think if you can lay that to the side, I think it can be extremely liberating. I think that's when the floodgates sort of open in terms of what you can accomplish in your career, whether it's in Overwatch or in other avenues. And also as a coach, like having been an Overwatch League coach, I appreciate it so much when I get players who have gotten over themselves, who have gotten over that hump themselves, and I know they won't be a distraction. I know that I won't have to dedicate extra time to make sure that they're behaving, and I'm just going to be able to focus on the team objective to get us better. So how important do you think that is, having been in so many teams, maybe in 10 teams before the Overwatch League? Now that you are in the league, how important is it, and kind of how did you learn to get to the point where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, I think like past teams like I mean, I think I got over myself in terms of like having a massive ego or whatever on my mechanics back like when I was a DPS player, back when I was like even playing on collegiate Overwatch, because like I was really like mean to like my team on ASU, cuz or Arizona State University, when I played with them, because I think like most of them were like diamond players and stuff like that, and I was like really trying to legit hard carry them into winning a collegiate. And like for the most part, even in practice and like all the time, like I was just unchecked. Like they didn't even care, or they might have cared I was being a dick, but like I was the biggest dick to like all of them. And then like after that happened, I just like, and then after being on another team, after being on Kagarna, I was like, all right, I don't want to be, a bad teammate. I don't want to be someone that like makes people rue coming to practice or whatever, stuff like that. Like it definitely is impactful what you say to other people, and then also like I don't know, just like those experiences help me grow and help me realize that not everything is about being some mechanical god. You have to be at least a good teammate, at least someone that doesn't ruin people's days.
Mm-hmm.
um, but yeah, I think that a lot of people I played recently coming into Overwatch League and then also in Overwatch League have realized this too eventually. That it's important to be a good teammate and you know involve yourself in the team culture and because I don't know a happy team is has a better chance of winning
Yeah.
for sure.
Mm. Were there any kind of strategies that you employed to sort of check yourself and hold yourself accountable and honest when you were working on these things?
Um, I don't think I necessarily. I think I just I think there were just points where like maybe we're in a slump or something like that, and then like I just realized that I don't know. There's nothing I really did to employ anything. I think the first thing that always came to my mind in the tier two scene was just fucking was fight or flight or whatever. So it's like if we're not doing well, then I just want to fucking I want a new team, but I also still want to be good and professional to my current team.
Mm-hmm.
So when I at least when I was at those points where when I realized it's maybe time to move on or something like that in the tier two scene, then I should just like also stay true and stay good to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Like just in those situations.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Mhm. So, as you were sort of coming up and jumping from team to team and trying to make it, you obviously dabbled a little bit in casting. You launched Ultimate Advantage, which was pretty much the fastest growing podcast. I've never really seen a podcast grow that fast out of nowhere. And you obviously had a lot of early success in that department. I wonder, were you at any point, because I think for every player, you reach this point where you have to make the next step decision. And I think making the next step decision is one of the hardest things to do. When do you give up on your career and pursue something else, especially if you are skilled enough and you have skills in other departments where you can transition into another role within the scene. Were you at any point when you were sort of experiencing this success and maybe the playing career wasn't evolving as quickly as you wanted, were you at any point going, well, maybe I should just pursue this instead? I have a great opportunity to fill a gap here. Or do you think sort of the inner competitor in you wouldn't have allowed it until you really turned every stone?
Yeah, I think I did all of that. I did that with coaching, with casting, with even observing.
Mm-hmm.
Just like I don't know, like I think there was like a coaching opportunity with Renegades that I tried to go after like back a while like 2 years ago. Um and I was like 18, so like they didn't want an 18-year-old coach, so that prevented me from going to the coaching side. Um which obviously was a good thing. But with casting I did like because you can't just go right into Overwatch League as a caster. I wanted to at least get some experience and stuff like that. So I did collegiate casting with like with the college scene with collegiate Overwatch and TESPA, and then what else? And then with observing, I think like I messaged one of the replay guys at Overwatch League last year to see if I could help with that. With observing, just so like I could make some money on the side while I was competing in like the tier two scene. So I think overall, I definitely think that I'm a competitor and I like to play the game. Um, but I think that it's important as like as just a human being to focus on your future at the same time. So like if there was other things that I could be doing instead of playing or something like that, or that like I would be better at than playing, then yeah, I'd probably do it.
So you
Um,
think if like say an offer had come over after you did the TESPA casting and all of that, do you think if an offer came over to join the league, Overwatch League, as a caster, you would have gone for that at that point?
yeah, I probably would have. It just yeah. I think the most part is that they just didn't happen. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just like I focus on what's like what I'm good at and what I think is feasible, which is playing, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
casting and stuff like that, I think I'm decent at, but I think to be a Overwatch League caster and stuff like that, it takes like a more refined and more experience, I guess, in which I do not have.
Yeah.
So I had the experience of playing, so I figured I'll just keep
Mm-hmm.
keep playing.
Yeah. I mean, you sort of have to work on your craft the same way you do as a player. I remember back before Overwatch League when Mitch was doing a stream and he was doing a review of his own cast, and I hadn't realized before then how much the guy thinks about his casting. Like he's watching it like we would watch a player VOD and breaking it down to a granular detail, and even something that is like something that might be the fault of the observer, he kind of goes, well, I could have done a better job here. I could have said something to lead the observer, and then I would have done a better job. Like that's how much a guy like that commits to his craft, and you sort of gain an appreciation for the casters and how much work they put into their craft. And you understand that I can't just go in and take their job or compete for their job because I'm so far off that level. I have to commit the same amount of hours. So yeah, I mean, it certainly
Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they joke about it and stuff like that. Like when I was on the desk, they're like, "Oh, Overwatch League 2020 fucking Dogman comes up here on the desk," and it's like that's a. I mean, I'll take the compliment, I guess, but it's like that's definitely the jobs they do are definitely hard. I mean, they have to focus on things like their voice and stuff like that, like voice pitch, and then also like energy is like a big factor and casting consistently because you have to bring like a lot of enthusiasm every day. And that might not like depending on how you feel, that might not be like the best, but like as a player, like you can easily just adjust how you feel and just like it won't be as apparent, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
than it is as like a caster where you need to be like on your A game all the time, and then also need to be like more social and stuff like that, so that you can like I don't know bond with other casters and get their experience and stuff like that. Because each caster is good at like at their own thing, but all of them like understand the basics of casting and what's like important in that regard. So I
Mm-hmm.
mean, they're all really smart dudes for the most part, and you know, I
Yeah.
aspire to perfect my craft in playing, and then also in casting like they do,
Mm-hmm.
I suppose.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like what you say about endurance as well. Overwatch League, they obviously rotate quite a bit, but when you look at something like the Pacific Showdown, where one pair of casters casts for like 13 hours straight, to me, like that's insane. Like, how can you by the last game put together a product like cast it in a way where it just doesn't kill the broadcast? Where I'm like, okay, I have to mute. I don't understand. I really don't understand how you can stay that focused for that long. So, yeah, especially the guys who are coming up now as new casters, I think they're doing a really good job and really putting in the hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. So moving on to sort of kind of more earlier stages of your career, I suppose Citizen Seven was kind of one of those teams where that was. I feel like that was sort of the first time when you broke into, I guess, the tier one NA ish area. You guys made it into the, I think, group stages of the NG Winter Premiere.
Hmm.
But if I recall correctly, you didn't win a single map. So you kind of made it into the leagues with the big boys, but you weren't obviously ready to really compete at that point. What was sort of the time in Citizen Seven like? Did you feel sort of accomplished, or that you reached a milestone when you kind of qualified for that tournament?
I guess the joke is what C0 and 7 or whatever. Um, so I guess we were the first Valiant before Valiant was Valiant with their own seventh season. So I mean, I'll take credit for that, I guess.
Yeah.
But what is it? I don't know. Like when I was playing on Citizens 7, I think if I look back, I was playing. Oh, I was playing DPS. I was playing McCree on teams like CLG, and that was like the near the top of like the tier 2 scene at the time, simply because that team had like a lot of players that would eventually go on to like other teams like Tempo Storm and stuff like that. But after that team, I realized that like it was really hard to get like a DPS spot. So I was just kind of like going for whatever roles were open at the time. I'm pretty sure I tried out like an off tank, and then I tried out flex support with Method. And they didn't pick me up after Wolf got picked up to Cloud9. So I think I tried out for Immortals as a Lucio player, which is now Valiant, and I was doing decent. I was against Pooks for the position, but I think they picked up somebody else. They picked up Verbo.
Yeah.
Um, but I was trying out for that position, so I was like, I should do a side project and I should commit to whatever role I'm playing now,
Mhm.
which was Lucio. So I just decided to make a side project, um, which was Citizen 7. And I wanted to just get, for fun, I just wanted to get all like the top collegiate players and then see if we could compete. Um, in which we did pretty decent. I mean, I got like 5 other collegiate players, and I just played Lucio, and I just like tried to micro them 24/7, where I would just like constantly tell our Reinhardt what to do, when to use his shatter, stuff like that. Um, and it didn't really work out in the long term, but I mean, we did make the group stages, so
Mhm.
that team was definitely like one of the starting points. And then after then, I just decided to go back to playing Zen. Um, and then I just kind of stuck with it after then. Got picked up by Splice, and then I went to Congarna
Mhm.
and stuff like that. So
Yeah. So speaking
yeah, I mean,
about Kungarna, because I think that was an interesting chapter in your career, because especially when you guys, I guess, moved back from Splice to Kungarna, you guys went into season 0 of Contenders, and even though season 0 wasn't the last tournament before Overwatch League, season 1 was. I feel like season 0 was really one of the most important tournaments of all time for almost all players at that time, because basically teams were dropping their players. It was kind of a make or break time for a lot of guys. Even for me, we obviously underperformed with Misfits in that tournament. We lost in the quarters to Bazooka Puffies of all teams, and that was kind of the end of my player career. And that was obviously the fate that I think a lot of teams suffered at the time. A lot of teams who underperformed. You saw even a team like Cloud9 who fell out of the group stage thanks to you guys, and instead of any of them making the London Spitfire, C9 was like, well, we have to rebuild. Let's pick up 2 championship rosters out of Korea, which obviously proved like a good decision. But if C9 performs well in that tournament, maybe they build a mixed roster and the history looks different. So I think that's a tournament that had so many Overwatch League implications, I guess.
mm.
And I think everyone felt the pressure heading into that tournament. Were you guys sort of in the same boat? Did you feel like this is make or break for us? We have to perform here.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. But I also think like in while that was make or break and stuff, we were still playing in like other like tournaments, like the Overwatch Rumbles and stuff like that, where like some good teams are playing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we like sort of found a gauge of where we were at the time. Like, let's see if we go back into things like the Overwatch Rumble. Before that tournament, we played Cloud9 there too, and we lost to them. So it was like we kind of got like a gauge of where we were in the Rumble, and then like sort of figured that I mean, obviously Contenders was like the big thing. So when we played in Contenders, obviously there was like a lot of pressure to perform and stuff like that. In which I think I mean we did so in the group stages,
Mm-hmm.
and because we really wanted to qualify for season 1 of Contenders. So I guess like at that time we were still like working on getting signed and stuff like that. Um, but we're also keeping in mind that because I'm pretty sure that the Overwatch League was already announced for that year, right, or whatever. It was like coming
Yeah,
up.
yeah, pretty much.
And everybody knew that, I guess. So in my head, I wanted to stay unsigned so I could like get in the Overwatch League easier and not
Mm-hmm.
have a buyout, because I heard that like buyouts could like prevent you from getting like onto other teams, because some people not gonna want
Yeah.
to pay for a buyout. So um, yeah, I don't know. Like we our pressure was more or less just to perform well and then still stay unsigned. Which obviously there's a lot of uncontrollables there, because it's hard to stay um unsigned in tier 2 forever,
Mm-hmm.
because then you could just get evicted or whatever. But
Yeah.
it
So
was
yeah.
yeah.
Uh, One of the big things is obviously through that tournament was that, like you said, you get to qualify for season 1, which is the last impression you get to make on Overwatch League teams before the league starts. And to do that, like I said, you made it out of groups. You beat LG Evil, who were the only team actually in that group stage to win every single game. So one of the best teams in the tournament. You guys beat them, and you ended up losing to Immortals, but you still finished top 4. You qualified to season 1, but to even get to that point, you guys had to win a best of 1 tiebreaker against Cloud9, if I'm not mistaken, in the group stage. Um,
Yeah.
so and like to me, when I think about players' careers. I think there's kind of defining moments or defining matches in everyone's career where a map here or a map there, and it kind of leads you down a different path. And to me, it almost feels like that best of one for you and for like the rest of the Kungarna guys was that moment. Do you feel like that was one of those moments? What do you feel like heading into that type of a predicament? I guess best of one Oasis, so much variance, and that kind of decides so much of what your future might hold.
Yeah, what happened is we beat I think we beat Hammers, or we drew Hammers Esports, which had Shaz on at the
Hmm.
time. Um, and like we like I think like they were like the worst team in our group by far, and we like all we had to do was beat them for like I think one more map or something like that. And then we didn't do it, so we thought we might have even been out of the tournament. But like we were like obviously like you said we were like on a similar record or whatever to Cloud9, so like we like had that 1% chance to play them for that spot, and then we got it, and then it was on like a waste or something like that, and yeah, I don't know, it was fun, it was a good experience, and I don't know, after that, what was it, my teammate Dre or Baby or whatever got called said that I had the clutch gene after that or something like that, so so it was fun. I mean, it's good to be to know at least known within our friend group or whatever, or our team, that I could perform in big moments and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Um, that was like a really big moment. So I think it was important to perform in that situation, and we did as a team, and I feel like individually I did in that situation as well. So
Hmm.
that definitely is carried over to even now,
Yeah.
playing against like good teams like we mentioned, like NYXL and stuff
Hmm.
like that.
Yeah, I think I actually remember vaguely now when I think about back to those times. I think I vaguely remember a Twitch clip or someone uploading. I think maybe it was Michael who uploaded this clip of the winning moments of that map and how crazy the comms were and how hyped up you guys were. So I really think that that kind of exemplifies how big of a moment that was for all of you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think that those like Overwatch League right now, like definitely dulls in terms of comparison with the with the hype
Yeah.
that those teams brought. Like especially that match with Cloud9 and Kangarna, then with Citizen Seven when we were like qualifying or like beating good teams or whatever like that. Like I would always probably like yell at the top of my lungs and stuff like that during those situations. But now for sure, now I've calmed down. I think most people generally in Overwatch League you need to kind of be calm. Otherwise, it's like, I mean, unless you do something big
Yeah.
like win a group stage or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's like the goal, is to get to the, you know, those highs of emotions that were more possible in those situations,
Yeah.
like back in the day.
Yeah, like every win sort of meant a little more. Even like speaking
Yeah.
about clips, even the famous clip where McGravy kind of rolls out on Hanamura and kind of shoots people on the point when Envision, I think, qualified for contenders as
Oh
well.
yeah.
Like those moments are just so fun to kind of remember. But sort of moving on to more recent times when you eventually join LNL, you guys have a great showing in contenders, being a team that sort of comes up through trials. You get out of groups, and then eventually you get picked up by Atlanta Academy. You guys perform very well. You end up beating, I think, NRG and Envious in the playoffs, and then you lose 4-2 to Philly in the finals. So, sort of during this transitional period, what did you feel like going from LNL to Atlanta, having a little more resources? What was that like? Did you feel like you, with that core of players, could make a deep run? And did you feel like you were sort of getting closer to being signed at this point?
Yeah, I think it felt pretty good because for the most part, like academy teams before before we got picked up for Atlanta Academy, let's see. So I guess like for the most part we didn't have the majority of our team, or like a couple of our teammates. Like we didn't bring Nex and we didn't bring Decard along from LNL, but we kept Sugar Free, me, Ajax, and who else? Sugar Free, me, Ajax. I guess we didn't keep. We only kept us three to Atlanta Academy. But we got to kind of pick and choose what players we wanted to play with. And I think in academy teams before this, a lot of the decisions were not made by like the players and stuff like that. Like teams are picking up players like piece by piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
and that like I think works in Overwatch League, but I think in contenders, what's important is to have good synergy and also like a lot of the pre-existing things that come with a team before anything else. Because I think mechanics and stuff like that matter, especially if you want to pick somebody up for the Overwatch League later on. But if you do that, I guess you shouldn't really consider how well they do in contenders because like in contenders, I think what matters definitely like one of the bigger things is just how you synergize and how good your understanding limit is and stuff like that. So I mean, I felt pretty confident because we had a lot of really good players coming into Atlanta Academy. We had Gator, which was um, one of the goats originators. He was like one of the first players that played goats. And his Reinhardt was like really good, and he always had top 10 and stuff like that. And then we had Hawk also coming in. Besides the LNL players, I'm talking about like people that
Mm-hmm.
were coming in.
Mm-hmm.
We had Hawk, which was this like, which is I think he's 17 now, but he was a 16-year-old kid that was like really good at Diva. I played with him in the past. He's probably the biggest person like that we had to take like a leap of faith on because we didn't know how good he was. Um, and then we got Saucy, which is also like top 10. Like all these guys were top 10 in like ladder and stuff like that. But which was also and stuff like that that me and Ajax and who else picked crap? Me and Ajax had, I guess, coming into Atlanta Academy. So I think we knew we could compete. Um, and obviously we did. We got second place in contenders, and that was kind of like one of the bigger moments in my career, I guess, because that's kind of like one of the things that sparked me getting into the Overwatch League in the first place was performing so well in contenders. Um, so I don't know. I think Atlanta Academy as a whole has a good lineup now, but um, our lineup when I played was extraordinarily good, and I think we definitely could have even won contenders, um, if you know a few other things went our way.
Mm-hmm. So, coming off that good result, obviously you end up moving on to the league. There's the looking for team bamboozle where you posted that you're looking for a team. You thanked Atlanta Academy for the good times, and then a couple of days later you get announced for the main team. But what was sort of the time like leading up to that bamboozle that got a lot of the guys or a lot of the people, a lot of the on social media and all that type of stuff? When did you get the call? What were your emotions like? When did you know you were moving up? What were sort of the days and the weeks leading up to that moment?
I mean, yeah, everything is pretty consistent. Like I, for the most part, didn't really feel like any different. Like I said, my goal was not to get in the Overwatch League. My goal was to be a really good player.
Mm-hmm.
So like when I knew that Eric and Paul wanted me for Atlanta Academy, or Atlanta, the Overwatch League team, it didn't really change like my perspective and stuff like that. And we just kind of like with that bamboozle is just like kind of it was just like a spur of the moment thing. Like we just wanted to have fun with it and
Mm-hmm.
just say some funny stuff, get people's Jimmy's rustled, I guess. Because personally, like I don't like view myself that highly yet. Like I think it's weird that people like are like, oh man, he's one of the best performing players on this team. Why would he get dropped or whatever, something like that? It's like it's weird because like I don't see that much. I guess for the most part, like I think people tend to overrate players in certain situations, and I think flex sports as well. I feel like tend to get overrated. Um, so I don't know. That's just personal preference. So I didn't really. It was definitely weird to see all the see all the people upset over it. But cool at the same time, I suppose. And then as soon as I got here, we did like as soon as we got here, we did that video, that one with Cass saying that I was talking about how I was removed from the team. And so like spur of the moment, and we just wanted to have fun with it. And I think Dafran had some big parts in those situations as well when I got picked up by the team
Mm-hmm.
of what to do for the social media side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if you actually were dropped, then as we know now in hindsight, you probably would have been picked up by the NYXL since Pavane thinks you're better than Jonak. So I think
Yeah.
it would have been fine. But in on a serious note, kind of coming in obviously early on in the season, but still like no boot camp with the team, no long preparation, no real time to build synergy or kind of camaraderie with the whole group. Was that a challenge coming in? How quickly did you sort of settle into the team culture, and what was sort of the challenges early on?
Yeah, I think it was a challenge. I mean, like the first stage was really stressful. I think with the different lineup with the players that we had, we had such insane peaks. Um, and then also we also like generally could like our seal floor wasn't that like low, it was still pretty high. But the biggest thing I think in stage one was consistency with like emotion and stuff like that. It it was it wasn't like I don't know. It was just harder to compete consistently and like to bring our A game to practice, I guess, consistently to compared to now or whatever with Dre. Just because it was like random on how good we do in practice or whatever, and then it
Mhm.
might in fact like impact us as a whole. Um, so I don't know. I think stage one specifically was really tough. It was one of our best stages. Or was so far it was one of our best stages out of two stages
Mhm.
so far. But yeah, I don't know. Stage one was definitely a new experience, and for me coming into the team, it was pretty much like any other team I was on. You'd think before coming to Overwatch League that things are so different, but realistically, they're not. It's just like everyone's performing at a higher level. It's the same teams that you play with in like contenders. It's just everyone's more coordinated. You have more coaching and analysis, but like everything's still on you to perform and stuff like that. So um, it's like whether I was gonna play on the team as a starter or not, I was like more focusing on like what I could do to get in that position in the first place, I
Mhm.
guess. Um, Whereas all those things were definitely still in decision stage one as well. So there was definitely like a lot at play stage one that like even I'm pretty sure that in Outlaw's video recently they said there was like a lot of things like that went wrong for them where they were still deciding like the starting roster and
Mhm.
stuff like that. In which we were like still deciding that kind of thing in stage one. But we still did well, so it's like I don't
Yeah.
know how bad can you be to still do poorly when everybody else is dealing with those same issues, and they knew
Yeah.
that. I guess they did say that in their video to give them credit. They
Yeah.
did they did say
Yeah.
that we still should have performed even if there was outside circumstances preventing us from doing so.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, every team, like, this is what people don't understand. Like, every team is dealing with like 30 or 40 issues at the same time, and it's just about being efficient and trying to solve them, like being able to recognize the most pressing issues, addressing them, and kind of pushing them away and away and away so that you only have minor problems to deal with. And that's where you can actually perform at your best, I think. But
Yeah,
sort of because we're talking about intangible skills, being a good teammate, learning how to have strong mental fortitude, all that stuff. Like, I think another skill, sort of, when you go into the league, is being able to handle I guess, handle the fact that you're under a magnifying glass. Like, everything is magnified. There's a lot more
yeah,
attention. You are dealing with so much pressure from the outside in the social media, and I think being able to handle social media is kind of an underrated Overwatch League skill that people don't really think about. And obviously, you had kind of as my dog is storming into the room, you had one of those issues where you posted a tweet where you're like, oh, we're a terrible team, and in the spur of the moment, dealing with those emotions, was that something as well that you were like, oh shit, this is something I need to work on? This is, I shouldn't let the emotions get to me. I should be able to filter out social media and Reddit and Twitter, because I think that's something I learned. Getting so much criticism, you have to be able to tune out at the right time. And I've seen also players who kind of read into their hype too much, and then they end up sort of growing an ego. And I've seen guys who read all the criticism, and then it just kills their confidence, right? So I think from
yeah,
all aspects, it's kind of a skill. How has that been for you, and do you think that's an important skill to master?
yeah. I guess around that time, around when I said that tweet, I was definitely filtering around out social media a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
Like not check. I really don't go to like I used to like before then go to r/competitive Overwatch and stuff like that all the time. Um, but I guess the more you play, the more and more you read about that stuff. Like it's definitely not worth to check out that much. But in that situation, like I definitely not did not mean to to tweet that. It was definitely worded so bad. I
Yeah.
could have just there were so many other things I could have worded it as like to phrase how I meant it. Um, but you know what is it? It doesn't matter what you say or whatever. It matters how people take it. And in
Yeah.
that situation, people didn't take it very well. So that was a very bad tweet. Uh, but you know we live and we learn. So in that situation, I learned to you know not make those tweets, and especially since you know we're still such a new team. We still picked up two new players, and we're playing with two new players at the time. And even though yeah we should have won that game, um, we're still like you know getting better as a new squad. So I don't
Mhm.
know. There's like a lot of those like social media interactions that I've had in the past, and especially with being more of a polarizing figure in the league. Um, I think it's just better to not go out hunting for things by yourself. Um, and I think
Yeah.
that's also why people like a lot of players don't interact with the crowd that much or like do that much like exciting stuff on stage is because they don't want to like be in the limelight really. They don't want to like they don't want to have that extra added pressure, which is understandable, I guess, if you don't know how to deal with it. Like there's players like I guess players like Shaz for example. Like Shaz is like a sweet and quiet guy and he's a good player, but he'll never yell on stage or like get the crowd pumped up or yell at an enemy or something like that. Like it's probably I think it's probably in part to him not wanting to be in the limelight or like to deal with that stuff. And I think a lot of players in Overwatch like also don't want to do any of that stuff. And like I know what is it? Unco tweeted recently like
Hmm.
cringy guy. I've never seen a cringier guy in my life or something
Yeah.
like that. And like I have fun with those tweets. Those are nice to see. It's nice that I'm getting some free rent space in his head.
Yeah.
But like by all means, if you don't want to like yell or be a Sheldon gamer, then you can do so. But
Hmm.
you don't have to. You don't gotta judge people for having fun with the crowd when they want to or whatever.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and
And
I think that's what I do. And I think with social media, it's just best for a person in my position to read what I want to read and
yeah.
to avoid most of the most
Yeah.
of the comments.
Yeah. I mean, certainly, like when it comes to trash talking, you've done it probably better than most of the players kind of in season one and even this season. And you can kind of see yourself reaping benefits, like you mentioned, some players who kind of don't do that, and they don't really get that much attention and they like to stay out of the way. But at the same time, if you look at your situation, you are reaping the benefits. You have trash talked a lot, you have put yourself in the limelight, the crowd cares about you, right? So and I think that's why you look at I saw that announcement where they posted the top 7 selling jerseys of stage 2. Obviously Dafran dropped out, so there's someone who can take that space, and then use as a veteran rookie coming in with like half a stage under your belt, or like 1.5 stages under your belt, and you take that spot next to Ryu Jae-hong, next to Joe, and like these guys who built brands and popularity over entirety of a season, right? And you're there to take the space because you do these things. Do you think about that as well when you're doing these things, or is it just more to amp yourself up, to put on the show for the crowd? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, recently I haven't like done it as much, but I think yeah, it's just the most part. I just do it for fun or to amp it up. Like I was thinking, like I hope when we play against Shock or something like that, I hope Super does some sort of trash talk or some sort of thing, banter back and forth, because that's always fun. And I know Super likes that stuff, so hopefully he can, you know, he can involve himself into it. But I never thought about it of like some sort of long term thing. I thought, in fact, I thought afterwards, I thought like, oh crap, I might get kicked out of the league for something like this. So, so it's like it's more of definitely like a spur of the moment thing. I don't think I'm gonna just kind of do it for better or for worse. If that makes me dumb or not, then by all means, I might still do it. I might not, but it just depends on how I feel on stage, I guess.
What was it like when you saw that announcement that your jerseys, and considering how far you've come, and I don't want to say in such a short time because you have had such a long journey, but I guess how far you've come in such a short time in Overwatch League. How like considering your whole journey, what did that feel? Did you care at all when you saw that? It was like, wow, I'm doing something right, and kind of was that a moment where you can sit back and reflect a little bit on everything you've kind of had to go through?
Oh yeah, I mean it was sick. I never thought I'd be on that top jersey sale. Like after the first one saying that I wasn't on it, I was like, all right, I'll never get on it or whatever. So it's like I don't really pay too much mind. But then yeah, then they announced it for this stage, and I was like, oh, that's pretty sick, man. That's pretty cool because like I didn't think that everything I've done or whatever would actually like amount to more jersey sales or something like that. Like that was definitely surprising. And it's cool. It's awesome. It's nice to see that fans care and support that kind of stuff. And that the people hating on it or whatever don't really matter because in the end of the day, I got top 7 of the jersey sales, and that's pretty sick, I guess.
Yeah.
Something I can brag about a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's nice for sure. It's surprising and nice. Those
Mhm.
two are the best descriptions I have of it, I think, or
Yeah.
descriptors.
I mean, the biggest thing I think is, when you do go out and you trash talk and you kind of attach that to your persona, I think you have to basically just have to accept one thing. You have to accept the fact that if you trash talk and you lose, everyone's going to be coming for your head. And if you don't let that affect you, because I think you do have kind of an obligation to your team to not let any things like that affect you, because you don't want someone else's opinion who's outside the team, who's not one of your peers, to affect you in game. And as long as that's the case, as long as the repercussions, so to speak, don't affect you, I think you kind of you only have benefits to reap in that regard. Even if you look, I don't know if you follow League at all, but obviously Doublelift, one of the most famous
Yeah.
players in League, like when he was coming up, he wasn't that outgoing, but he had a lot of confidence in his gameplay. He famously said that everyone else was trash but me. People started caring about him, whether it was people who wanted to see him lose or people who wanted to see him win. People cared, and that grew his brand. It helped him come out of his shell. All those interactions, I think, helped him grow as a brand, as a person, as a player. And I think in the long term, it just led to something good. And it's because he was having fun with it. I think he didn't let anyone affect him. He didn't let it affect his confidence. So I think it's definitely something that you can kind of look at as a positive light on top of kind of hyping up the crowd. But do you think do you draw kind of anybody? You mean, you said you thought, oh, I never planned doing this, I probably should scale back a little bit. But since the fans are kind of enjoying it, do you intend to sort of keep doing it since you see that you're kind of reaping the benefits? Are there any boundaries that you set that you obviously wouldn't cross? What do you think in regards to that?
Yeah, I mean, I respect Double Lift a lot, and I can get back to that in a sec. But like, I don't know. I never let like trash talk or anything like that like get in the way of how like my team performs or something like that, or like how we do as a team in our matches. Like, I'll never let that like impact our game. I guess like unless I feel like a game is on lock or unless I feel something like some sort of exuberating confidence, like I'll keep focusing on my team first before trash talking or something like that. Um, so I don't know. I tend to like not. I let it like flow out naturally, but for the most part, that when it does come out, it's usually when I feel it's most right or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
where it won't impact my team and how we're performing or something like that in the match. Um, and I think that's like I guess one of the boundaries I have set, but it still comes out naturally. Like that's probably the same for Double Lift is when he trash talking or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
or when he was talking in interviews, he wasn't thinking about that during the game. Like he doesn't think about that. Like he may think about it before the game or whatever, but it's important to just like speak that confidence when you feel is right, not or speak and think about that confidence when you feel is right, not during situations that like require your 100% attention. So it doesn't. I just don't let it take all of my attention away. Like even if it does give me more jersey sales or more popularity or whatever, I don't really care about that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I just have fun with it, and
Mm-hmm.
that's like the biggest thing.
So, kind of wrapping up stage one, you guys went into the playoffs. You went against Philadelphia Fusion. You ended up losing that game. What did you feel like? Kind of obviously you said your team was a little up and down emotionally. You were kind of inconsistent. what did you feel heading into the playoffs with Fusion being your first matchup? Do you guys feel like you guys could go far? What was the ceiling? What was sort of the feeling heading into that match?
Yeah, I felt like we could win. I think the biggest thing is that I kind of wish that stage playoffs kind of matter for more. I think yeah, money is like a big factor. But there's like no other like there's not that many like things to play for the in the stage playoffs. Like you're still playing for the end game. You're still playing for end of season playoffs. Uh, and then once you make stage, like, counts towards your goal. So I don't know. I think that in that match, I don't know if we necessarily played to 100%. Mainly because it didn't matter that much. And obviously Dafran was retiring after that stage, so I think that like everything, I don't know, it didn't matter as much, I guess, to make to do well in that
Mm-hmm.
stage playoffs. Like we definitely could have beaten Philly,
Mm-hmm.
um, but like we weren't 100% focused ourselves when we wanted to play our best, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
in that situation.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I wish we could have done better in that stage playoffs, but in the end of the day, it didn't even matter. So
Mm-hmm. So
there's not much. Yeah.
yeah. So like you mentioned obviously Dafran, his retirement and all that stuff. I'm a little curious because from the outside looking in, it does seem like Dafran is this enigmatic persona. It must be interesting to play with him. So what was it like playing with Dafran? Because obviously he also put Atlanta under the microscope in the sense, you guys were at the top of those bitrate donations on Twitch. You immediately became the most popular team off of his back, and everyone was getting that attention. So I imagine there were kind of no dull times. Do you have any fun stories of playing with the front?
No, I mean, so DeFran is a pretty self-deprecating, pretty humble guy. I mean, even when we were top bits or whatever or something like that, he would never take credit for it. Like he wanted us to all share in, you know, in the glory that is our team. But like yeah, he's pretty self-deprecating. Like every player who we go against, like he'd be like, "Oh, Nene is so much better than me, man. Oh, this guy's so much better than me." He'd just be like, "Oh, Carpe is like this insane player. I'm just garbage compared to him or whatever." Like it just be constant, just like depression out of his mouth, man. Like but he plays well. So I mean,
Yeah.
I guess someone like me, like I like to have confidence. I like to think I'm better than players. I like to think I'm better than every player in my role, whatever. He'll think the opposite. He likes to think he's the worst player in his role. So I mean, I guess whatever you want to do to compete, you could do it. And I don't know. I mean, it's nice to have the friend, except when he scared the shit out of me and just like come behind my chair and like try to do something stupid.
Yeah.
I don't know. He's a silly guy. It was
Mm.
nice to be around him.
Yeah. No, I mean everyone kind of has a different mentality when it comes to that stuff, I suppose. I think he actually tweeted about it that like that is sort of the way he views everything, and he hopes that he never loses it. I think I read a tweet like that where like that's how he holds himself accountable. That's like he's super critical of himself at every single moment. He tries to achieve perfection, and that's why he's so good. And you obviously look at it differently. So I think it's interesting that everyone has kind of different mindsets. But in terms of him retiring and departing the team, when did you find out about that? Was it before? Was it after the playoffs? How did you feel when that was going down? How did you, like how did you find out? Was there kind of a team meeting? How did you guys handle all of that? What was sort of going through your mind at that time?
I mean, I guess I knew it was coming. I mean, it was just kind of like inevitable at a certain point. Because I think even during stage one, he wanted to. I think he said this. He said he wanted to like leave even during stage one. So I mean, it was kind of inevitable. I thought he'd maybe stick around longer. But you never know with these types of things. He's his own person. He has his ideas and his his future and all that stuff that he worries about or that he likes to do or how much stress he's willing to be put under. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I think oh man, I mean, I just knew it was coming, I guess already.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's yeah, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. So, with him departing, you guys obviously traded for Baby Bay, a former teammate of yours, and I assume it was kind of an adjustment period in and out of the server, both in terms of, I guess, personality and playing style. Obviously, Baby has experience playing Zarya. I think in what was it, like quad tank, or was it a triple tank meta back in the day? But I remember him playing Zarya. But obviously, he didn't have a lot of scrim time on Shock. But at the same time, he's bringing that Shock pedigree. He's naturally learned a lot from them. What do you think, sort of, about this signing? As bringing in one of your former teammates, were you glad to have him on board? What was sort of the difference in style as well between him and Dafran, kind of heading into scrims?
Yeah, I was gonna mention that, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
That yeah, like Dre has or had like big shoes to fill. Like Dafran on Zarya was really good. Um, like Dafran was one of our like if he was like our star player pretty much in the team, in game and out of game. Like he was really good. Um, so like he generally had to perform well coming into the stage, but like we like didn't have that much time to practice, and he didn't have much time to practice already that much too, because yeah, he was benched on Shock for an entire year pretty much. So he kind of had to like relearn the game slowly, and but all credit due to Baby Bay. I mean, he's been grinding his ass off. He's been playing ranked like crazy. Um, scrims, he's coach feedback and like that. It's like stuff we did like a month before, or the team did a month before Overwatch League even started with Dafran. Like Dafran also was the same as Bebe at the beginning, where he like misuses bubbles constantly. He would like always like be caught out of position or something like that. But it takes a lot of coaching and a lot of just a lot of time to get better at the current meta, because it's definitely hard to get into it. Like you can't just take a guy from ranked ladder and then throw him into an Overwatch League game. He won't perform that well. Like look at I'm 37.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's decent, but like he's not Overwatch League caliber yet, right? Like he still has a lot of grinding to do. And he might be there already. Like he might be there now. But I think as a whole, it takes a lot more than just ranked ladder experience to you know to do well. You kind of just need to keep practicing, and you just need a lot of coaching, I guess, and you can't expect to be the best in the immediately. Um, and I might have expected too much in the beginning, because now we're doing well, and now Dre has experience, and now we have experience as six.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's like the biggest factor, is just constantly improving as six, and getting better individually.
Yeah.
I think Dre's filled those shoes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it did look a little shaky in the beginning, but you guys obviously finished the stage on a pretty positive note. And like you mentioned, like having a solid six over an extended period of time, having building that sort of familiarity is just so crucial in a meta like goats. Learning the communication hierarchy, who calls what, who calls the tempo shifts, who calls the bubbles, how are you guys taking space together, all that stuff. You can only get that through playing with the same lineup over a long period of time. And like I said, stage one, you had a lot of players in and out. Obviously, as you mentioned, Houston had a lot of players in and out because they couldn't figure out what the best lineup would be. And then you guys head into stage two, and kind of the same thing happens, where you have to not only incorporate a new player into the starting lineup, but like you said, fill the shoes of one of your carry players, right? And it's naturally, I think, a big adjustment. But something when I watched, I think, your first game against NYXL, and they show these little tidbits of in-game comms, like they show what you guys are talking about during certain fights or whatever. And when I listened to that, to your comms, it did feel, I tweeted this, I felt like having Baby Bay in your team kind of boosts morale a little bit. That's kind of how I felt from just that little tidbit. Obviously, that's very limited information, and you maybe can't really draw those conclusions, but that's kind of how I felt just listening to that. Do you feel like him being on stage, when he sort of started getting confidence, that he also helped in other departments in terms of boosting morale, in terms of keeping guys kind of excited and on their toes during games? And if so, like how does he generally do it?
Yeah, I mean, Dre's a pretty confident guy, and he's also a realist, so I think he'll never overrate himself on certain situations and stuff like that. And I think when like there's like when we beat NYXL and stuff like that, like he's genuinely surprised, right? Because like we like he thinks Nene is probably better than him at the time.
Mhm.
He's kind of similar to Dafran in that way, but can be flip floppy on that, I guess. But yeah, I think Dre definitely brings his confidence and um, leadership to our team. And then it's really good to have that consistency because now this stage with Dre, I think we definitely play a lot more consistent. We're a lot more focused. We have that winner's mentality, and I think he definitely brings all of that into the team now.
Mhm.
Yeah.
No. Speaking of another teammate of yours, Erster, because that's a player who I think has kind of been overshadowed because obviously Dafran was on your team, he got a lot of attention. Then Baby comes in, he's a popular player. You obviously steal a lot of headlines, and I think Erster kind of, and again like Daco grabbing headlines as well. So I think Erster kind of goes under the radar a little bit still. And from what I saw from him pre-Overwatch League and even how he's adjusted to the Brig role. Obviously, we haven't seen that much flexibility in terms of his hero pool because of how stagnant the meta is. We did see him a little bit on the Junkrat in your Anubis strats on defense, but I think Erster is still kind of criminally underrated. I think he's one of the best, if not the best, flex DPS in the league, and I think people just haven't been quite exposed to that. Do what was it like, kind of teaming up with Erster, and have you sort of gotten a similar impression? Do you feel like people are, not kind of giving him the props that he deserves?
Yeah. I mean, like coming into when I saw the Atlanta team announced, because this was when I wasn't on the team, I was like I was like pretty happy with Daco and Poke getting signed because I thought like I was a big fan of them from Element Mystic, like and I was a big fan of Masa too because of Giganti. So I thought like the team as a whole was like really good. And then I saw Erster was signed. I was like, "Who's this?" I was like, "Who? Chinese contenders?" I was like, "It's kind of a joke, isn't it? Like it's like they're not that good." And then I see Erster and scrims and stuff like that. I think without a doubt, without a shadow in my mind, without a shadow of doubt in my mind, Erster's the best flex DPS in the game. I mean, like he's really good. It's just that he's on Brig.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think even on Brig he's really mechanically good. And
Yeah.
like there's like definitely you underrate the mechanics of Brig because they may not be as easy to spot, I guess. But there's definitely a lot of poor Brigs in the league even that just like are starting. Um and I guess the biggest thing you could look at is like first death or something like that, see how many Brigs put themselves out of position. But for the most part, I doubt you'll never see Earthstar out of position. Like if you do, it's maybe like 1% of the time. So I don't know. He's one of the smartest players in the game, and definitely the best flex DPS in the game. It's just he hasn't had a meta to fully prove it, and I mean I think he just wants to have fun playing Genji and stuff like that. He doesn't care about being the limelight. He just wants to he just wants to play DPS
Hmm.
probably.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like you said, I think a lot of people underrated the guys from like a Future Zenith a little bit because they beat up on Chinese teams, which people didn't really hold in that high regard. But then you see the guys that came out of there. You see Michelle, you see Marvel being starters on Soul. You see
Yeah,
DM,
IDK, right?
yeah,
Where's
IDK's
ID?
IDK, yeah, he's just starting on Hangzhou. Then you see a guy like DM being sort of the star of Shanghai, and then Erster is kind of a little forgotten a little bit, but I think the league, will definitely see how incredible he is, and that's actually, when you think about that lineup, what an insane lineup that team was, and it's not
Yeah.
surprising that they actually dominated Chinese contenders.
Yeah, I mean IDK is a god. I mean he's like the star player of
Yeah.
Spark. I think Gushui was coming into the league as a star player, but IDK is like insane on Lucio. He's like one of the better Lucios in the league, obviously below Masa, but
Hmm.
obviously one of the better Lucios in the league. Um, and then if that even says how good IDK is, then and I think Erster was like the best player on that team
Hmm.
probably even.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
with all these other like really good players that came out of there, DM, Michelle, Marvel, and IDK. And Erster's still the best. I
Yeah.
mean, obviously it's not been proven yet.
Yeah.
But Erster is really good. And I think
Hmm.
people saw that even in Chinese contenders when he was playing like Genji
Yeah.
and stuff like that, and that's why people rated him so
Yeah.
highly.
Yeah. I think everyone rated him highly, and then everyone kind of forgot about him a little bit. And like you say, if he was the best lineup on a roster that where the main tank beats out Fisher for a starting spot, where the off tank beats out Zumba for a starting spot, I think that kind of says a lot about a player.
Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of moving on to stage two, because I think it was a very bizarre stage to watch from you guys. You obviously start out super slow, going 0-3. You're dealing with a lot of issues, like you said. Again, replacing your star player, rebuilding that synergy, the stuff that is so difficult to deal mid-season. Daco is in and out of the lineup. You end up beating NYXL after losing to a bunch of these teams that you should be beating. From the outside looking in, it just looks like a very, very chaotic stage. Insane highs, insane lows. What was kind of stage two like from kind of an all-encompassing angle?
I mean, I guess like upon reflection, it's probably like looked more realistic besides the charge game, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
than you'd think. Because like at the beginning, we played Boston first, I think, and then we lost 2-3. It was like a close map 5 that we definitely could have won. Um, and yeah, I don't know, that game we definitely should have won. But if like we won, then there's two 5 map games that happened. There was one against Valiant and then one against Austin. And I think Valiant was looking better. I definitely don't think we probably still should have beat them for sure. But like still we had 2 new players. And we're working on like that lineup and trying to do well with it. So I think like overall, it's not like the end of the world because we beat NYXL twice. Like we thought coming into this stage that like NYXL might be the games that we lose or whatever, you know. But like we just probably looked too far ahead or something like that. We didn't focus on what was ahead of us. We definitely should have beaten both Boston and Valiant. If we did, we would have been in stage playoffs. And but if you look at the what ifs at the same time, I guess, you know, we lost like every best out of or we lost every map 5 until NYXL. So that was like 5 best out of 5s
Mm-hmm.
that we lost. So if we won each of those best out of, or we won each of those map 5s, we would be like the third highest scoring team in the league or something like that right now. So I don't know. I think overall like 7-7 is pretty solid for where we are right now. And yeah, we started off 0-3. We didn't have the best stage, but I think that's just due to us like um, gelling together at the beginning of the
Mm-hmm.
stage, and you know the 2 new players I think is the
Yeah.
biggest impact. But I guess we'll see how well we've gelled and how well we are now, or how good we are now coming into this stage, because this is one of our hardest. I think this is the hardest stage yet for us, if I'm not mistaken, because we play Shock and we play Vancouver
Mm,
for the first 2 games.
yeah. Yeah, that's a rough one. Um, so sort of, but you guys, like I say, you ended up kind of peaking towards the end of the stage. The synergy seemed to be coming along because you guys did beat NYXL, and kind of everyone, after you beat them in the first game, everyone was sort of saying, well, NYXL didn't prepare clearly. They sandbagged. They're obviously just gonna 4-0 the rematch, and no one really gave you credit, I guess, even though if you watch the games, like you guys were playing very fundamentally sound goats. You were pushing your advantages really well. Anytime you sort of won a fight, you were spawn camping, you were taking the right positions, you were putting a ton of pressure on them, and you just kind of didn't allow them to play their style, And I guess it can also stem a little bit from the fact you probably felt like you had nothing to lose, and that you put that pressure on them, and they kind of fizzle out a little bit. Did you feel like you didn't get enough respect after the game, and did you feel like you figured something out about New York heading into sort of game two, I suppose? And how did you guys manage to get it done twice?
I guess this stems from like what we were talking about earlier with like not caring about what other people will say. Like
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, I like we can like talk about it like where it was like, oh yeah, we're the last game. People think the last game was a fluke or something like that. And we can use that as like added pressure or something like that. But for the most part, like we don't really care. Like it doesn't matter what other people say about our team. For the most part, it matters what we do in practice and what we do as a team to prove that it mattered. And I think this like I said, this upcoming stage will be a big test for us, I suppose. With the first two games being Shock and Vancouver, it might be more obvious if we beat those teams, um, that how good we are. Um, but I think for the most part we've always been kind of criminally underrated because when we had Dafran, a lot of the outside voices for the most part in the league were like saying that we were like that our record was better than how we actually were and stuff like that. Um, so I think for the most part, it's just kind of always been that way since the beginning of the
Mhm.
season, even. So for the most part, like we just haven't focused on that kind of stuff. Like we know how good we are, um, and even if they're like our casters or analysts or something like that saying how we're not as good as our record says, or now how we're better than what our record says and stuff like that, none of that really matters. I mean, the narrative changes all the time, and the biggest thing to focus on is just yourself.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, like you say, you guys do have a pretty tough schedule. I pulled it up here. Like you said, you start with Shock Titans on a back to back, which is one of the most dreadful things imaginable. And then next week you have another doubleheader with Shanghai and Seoul. Then you have Philly, and you finish things off with Toronto and Mayhem. So you kind of finish the stage off a little easier, but the start is very tough. So sort of not only looking at stage three, but also considering the rest of the season. What are sort of your expectations? Because right now you guys are sitting 2 spots away from um, the number 6 spot, which is sort of what everyone is shooting for, because that's kind of what guarantees you the playoffs. That helps you avoid the gauntlet. Do you feel like you guys have a shot to make it there, considering your remaining schedule, or are you just aiming for the gauntlet? What is sort of the expectations heading into the second half?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could definitely make the top six at least. But real quick, am I lagging by the way? Discord's been
Yeah, it's been a little laggy. There's been complaints in the chat as well. It's usually it's fine, but there's sometimes something cuts out, but it's not too bad. Like I can hear you, but
okay.
in the recording it might be a little iffy. But yeah,
Okay. I was just checking because I definitely see it
yeah.
said it dropped down to like 2 ms or something.
I'm not
But
sure. I'm not sure if it's me or if it's the Cox internet you guys have over there. If it is,
it
it's
could
not
just
a
be.
great. It's not a great advertisement for Cox.
No, it definitely probably is Discord or something like
Yeah,
that.
probably.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But let's see. But yeah, I think we definitely can make a run for that top six. I mean, like I said, the first this stage is a big test for us. So we'll see how it goes. I guess coming up. There's nothing really I feel like that I could say until
Mhm.
we've played the first two games. Because I think those two will be a big if we beat those if we win against Shock and we win against Vancouver, um, you know, then it'll be more obvious
Yeah.
to other people. But I think for the most part, I think we could definitely make top six. I think we're still making a run for that for sure.
Mhm. So something I suppose you must be looking forward to, and the rest of your teammates must be looking forward to, is the end of stage three, which is the Atlanta homestand weekend. And I think, considering what we saw over in Dallas and how incredible that event was, how excited are you excited to get on stage? Are you nervous? What are the feelings to kind of heading home and playing in front of your crowd and having sort of, I guess, an easier schedule on paper there, so that you can kind of put together a couple of wins. You saw how emotional and how incredible it was for Dallas, certainly. So, what are your feelings heading into that event?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to it. I know Atlanta as a whole is really supportive. There's a lot of people that go to the uh the the Battle and Brew bar and stuff like that. Like, there's a lot of people that do that kind of stuff that go out constantly and are really big um uh, really big Rain fans, and especially Atlanta as a whole is a really like passionate city. So for the most part, I mean, it's going to be insane. I'm pretty sure. It might be even more insane than the Dallas homestand. I know Texas is really insane, but Atlanta brings its own like fire and enthusiasm to games, and it's really going to be exciting to see that full packed out theater when we're there.
What was the venue? How big was the venue? I actually don't think I looked that up.
I think it's fits 2000. I don't remember. Let me see. Atlanta. Actually, I don't remember. It
Yeah.
suits quite it fits quite a bit of people in it.
Mhm.
There's like multiple layers and stuff like that. If you've ever been to like a massive like play theater kind of setup,
Mhm.
it's like that, I guess.
Okay.
It
Like
I
a
think
big
it's
stand-up sort of show or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Mhm.
like one of those. It's like that same place. So I'm curious how they'll set it up, but um, it's big. I don't know how many people it fits or
Yeah.
seats.
Yeah. Chat to saying Cobb Energy Center and that it's a
Yeah,
concert hall. So, yeah. Well, yeah, it's gonna be immense. I'm really looking
Cobb
forward to seeing another one of
Energy
those.
Center seats. 700 it says.
Hmm. How much?
2,700.
Okay, yeah, that's not bad.
So
Yeah, it should get pretty loud in there.
yeah, yeah, it'll be fun.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
So I think we will wrap up with some general news around the league as well. But something I actually forgot to ask a little earlier in the show, and something we alluded to was in your way coming up, you being kind of evicted from home by your parents. I'm curious about what is your sort of relationship with your parents now? Have they come around? How supportive are they? Because I think it's super important for all Overwatch League players, everyone who's involved in the league, to actually have kind of a support group back home. How has that relationship developed over time? Because obviously there's been a lot of trials and tribulations on the way.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, it took them. It took so when I got kicked out. Let's see. When I got kicked out, like they were pretty upset and pretty disappointed. Because obviously I wasted their money with college and stuff like that. Um, and that was, and I was just like trying to get out of the house, I guess, at that point. Because of because of how bad that was for me as well. So I think after that, like it was definitely a process that took just more time for them to understand what I was doing and stuff like that, and understand that I could be successful at some point. Um, but they were never obviously you're not going to believe your kid until he's actually making money and stuff like that. So I don't know. Like for the most part, I understood their why they were upset at me and stuff like that. Um, but over the course of 6 months, by the time they picked me up, they were like pretty much completely understanding. And now they're really supportive. They've come to my games and stuff like
Hmm.
that. I think my dad even bought a jersey, even though I'm pretty sure I could get them free jerseys and stuff like that, but they still bought a jersey. And then I think they're trying to get one for my grandpa or something like that too that I get signed. So they're really supportive, and it's nice to see. Um, and I call my mom like nearly every other day and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So yeah,
That's
my
yeah.
relationship's pretty good with my parents now.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear that everyone's come around and that they've gone from being upset with you to kind of boosting you in the
It's
jersey sales race.
Yeah, sorry, it's kind of turning up to you, but it's like kind of it's weird now because like,
Sorry, now
for
you're
the
cutting
station
out
when
a
that
little bit. If you can repeat that, it's
wait,
just Discord.
is it lagging still?
No, it's okay now. We're
Okay,
stable.
nice. Basically, it's like a little weird now because like for the most part, like when I go out to like family outings and stuff like that, like when I talk there, like it's kind of I don't know what to do, but like for the most part, the entire conversation is about what I do, and like it's just like it's all about me, and it's like kind
Hmm.
of like weird. It's like kind of like a narcissistic way of like looking at it. It's like I don't really want to make the entire conversation about me,
Yeah.
but it's like I suppose when you compare an esports job and playing video games for a living to I don't know working at a like a DM, what are the DMV? What is it, DMV? Like one of those places where
Yeah.
they give out licenses and stuff like
Yeah.
that. I don't know. Like when you compare the two, I guess like the other job can seem dull and boring or something like that. So people want to have that conversation. I guess I
Yeah.
don't know. It's definitely weird that the conversation has like moved to that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, no, I can definitely relate to that because that's usually because there's so much stress, there's always things going on, especially for myself when we were sort of in an environment where we're constantly losing, there's always things to vent about. So, I definitely relate to the feeling where conversations can become very one-sided, where you're like just kind of venting about your problems and your issues at your job, and they
Yeah.
just kind of take it. Yeah. Yeah. So last couple of news, I guess. I mean, it's been pretty dry in terms of news. These last couple of weeks, the big thing was obviously Nate Nancer jumping on the hype train of Fortnite, cashing in the Epic Games checks. What were your feelings in regards to the commissioner stepping down and moving on?
Um, yeah, I don't know. I guess it's interesting. I mean, I obviously wanted to have some fun with some tweets, make some memes. The what I tweeted, he's leaving us for Fortnite or something like that.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's kind of it's interesting. I mean, I'm glad he can do something, you know, more on his he can further his career or whatever he wants to do. I mean, that's on him, I guess. It's not really something that I have to focus on. But I
Oh, we're
think
lagging again.
it's exciting. We will have a nuke does. I mean, they
You,
could be diff back.
you cut out a lot there,
Okay, good,
like
because I
last
said something
sentence.
nice. I said something really bad, so I
Okay,
just won't repeat it.
nice.
No, I'm just joking. I don't know. We have a new commissioner. It's exciting. Um, we could get our Pepe's back or something like that. So
That would be
you never know.
incredible.
You never know. But I don't know. I don't think it matters as much as people think. I think that the success of Overwatch League will happen on its own, chord, not on the commissioner. And I think he's done a lot for us. I think the answer's done a lot for Overwatch. But he's not the end all be all. We keep growing. We still have Daddy Jeff.
Hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, first of all, I'm gonna make sure I beep out when you say the illegal word when you say Pepe, just so you don't get into trouble. Uh,
Okay.
but yeah, I mean, yeah, I think I'm kind of in the similar boat. I think Nate brought a lot as kind of a face outwards. I think he naturally had a lot to do with selling the teams to expansion, selling expansion teams to a bunch of owners, and he brought a lot to the table in that regard. But to steal kind of a point that I overheard on the Tactical Crash podcast was they mentioned, well, next year it's confirmed there is no expansion. So the challenge is just how are we gonna get the geolocation thing to work rather than how do we sell more sponsorships? How do we, with all the financial side? But so yeah, I think we'll be fine, and it's I guess nice to see someone furthering his career like you said, and it'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see who's gonna be kind of the face outwards because Nate was very sort of charismatic. He kind of was a good face and a good ambassador for the sport. So that was we'll see what happens, I guess.
Yeah, we
Uh,
gotta make we gotta make Jake the commissioner.
yeah,
That's what we should
exactly. No, for sure. That would
do. He's already the face of the league. We might
yeah,
as well.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we haven't seen that much of Jake, unfortunately, since Houston hasn't been doing that well.
That feels
Um,
bad, man.
yeah, but yeah, I do miss some regular Jake in my life. He is very pleasant to listen to. He certainly knows his way around words, but
Yeah.
yeah, I guess there wasn't really that much news in terms of Overwatch League this week. I guess something that came out last week, which I'm a little curious about what players around the league think about, was Toronto's moves in terms of moving away from being full Korean, picking up two Western players. So I guess what do you think about Gods and Sharik, and what do you think about that move that Toronto made? Hello,
Oh, yeah, we're
can you hear
good now.
me?
Sorry.
Did you get everything?
Yeah. Yeah, I got it. It was just like cut out. So you're asking me what I think about like Sharik and stuff like that in
Yeah,
the
and
in
and the move.
Toronto.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Toronto were decent before with their full Korean lineup.
Hmm.
And I don't know if the fact they're going mixed is, I mean, it's a good thing for sure. I think that there's benefits to doing so. I mean, you can open yourself to a bigger talent pool. You don't have to pull from just Korea. Um, so I think that that team, like as a whole, still like I don't know. I think that the pickups that they made were okay, but I don't know if it's necessarily something that's gonna push them to be like a top team.
Hmm.
I think they'll still be like okay and decent, but I think if we played them again, we would 100% beat them.
Hmm.
So like I don't know if if the picks really like meant that much. Like I think that specifically the roles they replaced, like Sharik instead of Yakpung, right? Was it
Mm-hmm.
Yakpung?
Mm-hmm.
I think Yakpung was one of the worst main tanks in the league. So I think that like that's already, I guess, like a step up.
Mm-hmm.
But then their off tank Envy, like he's decent. Like I think Gods is solid, but I think probably him and Envy are around the same level, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I don't necessarily think that I think their pickups will help them. But I don't know if it'll push them to the top.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, going into I guess the midseason break, I felt like they were one of the teams that should be making moves because even though I think they're also sitting at 7-7, which is the same record as you guys, I don't really see them in the same light as you guys because they went like 2-5 in I think they went 2-5 in stage two, and even in stage one on their path to the playoffs when they went 5-2, they I think beat one other playoff team on their way um to the stage playoffs, and I think it was actually you guys. And other than that, they only kind of beat up on the weaker teams. So I felt like even though they were both of you guys were at 7-7, you guys certainly had a stronger roster on paper. So I'm kind of happy that they're making moves. Again, like I don't know if it's gonna salvage their season, if they can have that big of if it's gonna give them a boost in terms of having a run for that sixth seed. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, it's good that they're making moves because I think they were one of the teams that had to make moves.
Yeah, what's their strength of schedule for this stage? Do they have
That's a good question.
So it looks like they play Paris, Spitfire, and Guangzhou Charge for the first 3 games. So I don't.
Yeah.
Their strength of schedule is like decent. I don't know if it's necessarily the hardest in the league. And then they play us, right? They play us at our homestand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean it's kind of an even schedule. I think they have bottom tier teams and they have better teams. I think I think they're going to ease into the stage pretty easily because they only have 1 game weeks for 3 weeks in a row, and that's obviously a tough opponent in London. But they also have Paris and Guangzhou, both of whom were sort of below them in the standings. So I think it's good that their schedule is actually a little softer in the beginning, and then they obviously have Gladiators in Houston, and then you guys and YXL. So again, they're going to close with a bit of a tougher schedule, but yeah, I think it's probably going to be helpful that maybe they can capture a little bit of positive momentum and then give us a good showing at the Atlanta homestand.
Yeah, they probably have to beat London and stuff like that.
Yeah, to actually make the playoffs.
Hard, like I was thinking about London specifically. I know that this is a little off topic, but London specifically, if the league ever went forced 2-2-2 or something like that, I think London would probably be the best team.
Mm-hmm.
Just because specifically London is like they have some of the best DPS in the game. Like they have Prophet, they have Birdring.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who else. Do they have any DPS players on their bench besides them? Oh, they have Guard. Guard's really good at Sombra.
Mm-hmm.
Like overall, their 3 are like super good. So I think and they were obviously just like a really good team at Dive in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So it's gonna be interesting. Like people think that it might like shake things up when 2-2 comes back, but like I'm pretty sure even this stage did they go undefeated this stage, or did they go? They went 6-1.
No, they went 6-1. They lost 1 game, which they shouldn't have lost. I'm trying to remember what game it was, but it was it was definitely a game they should have won. Yeah, they destroyed pretty much everyone, and then they lost a game they weren't supposed to lose, which is kind of London, regular season
and
London.
Then they play. Well, then they play the playoffs, and then they lost to Spark.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that was a bit odd.
Yeah.
What do you think about Spark and how they've Chengdu? They lost to Chengdu. The chat says.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you actually think about the Spark? Because I think they've looked better and better as the season has gone on. Ever since they kind of started incorporating Gushui in the lineup, and he's gotten adjusted.
Yeah, I think the Spark's really good. I think now that they have Gushui in the lineup full time, that's solid. I mean, it's good to have a starting roster and to stick with it. I think they're still mixing it up. I think they're still taking out his name's Alora, or what was his name?
Adora.
They're picking out him and their other
Crystal
player, I think, Crystal.
Yeah,
they're constantly in rotation with them still, I think. Yeah. So they're still trying to find their 6, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
But like we were saying earlier, it's important to have like a 6 that you play goats with, I guess, constantly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like important to not waver too much from that. So I think that they're still trying to find their footing, I suppose. In that they made it to the semifinals, so I guess that's pretty solid. I don't know if New York would have been better, or not New York. I don't know if London would have done better than them.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't know. I think Spark's really good. I think IDK is one of the best Lucios in the game, if not the best. I think like there's some people that compete with him. But right now IDK like tries to do and mostly does like a lot of hero plays for his teams that like keeps his teams in the games in like very crucial moments. Like situations where you think other Lucios wouldn't do something, he'd probably do it because it's like a very important part of the game, and it's like, oh, the Lucio will never come and boot me off the map here when
Hmm.
it's overtime, 99-99 or something like that, and then he goes and does it. Like I don't know, the guy takes big risks, and for the most part, like he pulls them off. So
Hmm.
I think he's like a big contributing factor. Him and Gushue are like some of the top players in the league for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Because it's something that I saw, especially when Goucher came in. I think you saw it in their goats play that they just didn't have the synergy. They were bubbling, and well, they were still holding shield. They weren't swinging. They weren't taking space together, and their Ryan goats just looked really, really sloppy at the beginning of the stage while he was sort of getting incorporated. And I thought that when they were actually in Winston goats, I thought they looked much, much stronger. I even feel like when they were sort of playing uh, Winston Goats mirrors against Vancouver, I thought they actually looked like the better Winston Goats team at that time. But then anytime they went on Ryan, they just looked kind of lost. And in that match against London, they did look like they've cleaned all of that up. So it does feel like a team that's on the up and up, and obviously, like you said, has a lot of individual talent in a lot of positions with IDK, with Gushue, and across the board there are some skilled players there. It's because I thought it was very interesting what you said as well. With the potential of the league, at some point going with a 2-2 lock, and London potentially being one of the best teams. I completely agree with that because I think I've thought for a very long time that Prophet is the best player in the Overwatch League in terms of his flexibility and just the impact he has on the server, being able to survive any meta and being impactful, or possibly the best player on his team in every single meta. I think that's just incredible for a player.
Yeah.
But
Well, what do you think?
mhm,
I have a question for you, Mineral. What do you think about this is a little, I guess, is a little off topic. What do you think about, because we're talking about news? What do you think
mhm,
about the trades for Fate with that
mm,
Valiant made?
mhm,
What do you
yeah.
what do you think what's going? Because you used to coach Florida, so
Mhm.
what do you think about that?
So I thought that, I mean, from Mayhem's perspective, I think, especially in hindsight, now with everything on the table, I think that was a terrific trade for the Mayhem, because it seems like they were planning to perhaps drop their academy team the whole way, and they managed to leverage two of the assets they had on that team into grabbing Fate, who I think he looked unhappy on Valiant. I think he just didn't look like he wanted to be there. But I think a happy Fate is a main tank that can definitely be a top 5 main tank in the league, especially in a Winston meta. I think his Winston is incredible. So I think Mayhem needed a star player. I think the team really lacked, especially in a Goats meta. There's no one who really stood out as a star, and I think Fate can potentially bring that. I don't think he's going to be that big of a lift in a Goats meta necessarily, unless there's other moves that are made. And so far, there's only Byram, I guess. But yeah, I think from the Mammoth's perspective, it's definitely a good move to pick up someone like Fate, and maybe try and convince him of your culture, try and get him to stick around long term, because obviously Mayhem kind of, we when I was still there, we hit the reset button, we clean out the roster. Obviously, this roster wasn't working, so you kind of hit the reset button twice in a year. You eventually need a piece to build around, and I think Fate can potentially be that piece
Yeah.
if he's happy. From the Valiant side, I think it's gonna be rough, because I do believe that Fate was one of their best players, if not their best player. I think actually their flex supports are also pretty strong. Um, so I think they do lose a big leadership figure, a really good player. I think Fact is decent, but I think, again, I rate Fate very highly when he's happy and he's at his peak. And then I do think Shax is really good. I do feel like he could potentially be a starter for Valiant in almost any meta. So, especially since they struggled and they rotated their Zarya players quite a bit from stage to stage, going from Kariv to KSF eventually. Um, so yeah, I'm
Well,
not too sure about the Valiant.
neither Mayhem or Valiant can make end of stage or end of season playoffs,
Hmm.
can they?
No, so you're
They
essentially building for the future, I think, with these moves, which is what you're looking at. You're not really looking at can we make a push for the playoffs like Toronto did. They're
yeah.
making a move trying to push for the playoffs, whereas for Mayhem, it's like, can we acquire a big piece that we can sort of pivot around and build around heading to stage 3? And with that, I think they kind of
Yeah.
accomplished it, but I don't really know if that's going to necessarily improve results, especially since I think they I think I still remember because I looked at the schedule from our perspective while I was still on Mayhem, and I know stage 1 was one of the easier schedules for us, and then it got progressively harder, and stage 3 was also going to be pretty hard. So yeah, what did you think
Yeah.
about those trades?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're decent overall. I mean, like, yeah, Mayhem probably got the better end of the deal, I guess, because I mean, yeah, like Fate is a really good player. I mean, it's like it's definitely weird because like the more he synergizes with teams that he likes to play with, he gets better. Because like I think the beginning of Team Korea 2018 when he was on that team, like he was like feeding his ass off. Like I don't think he was very good at
Mm.
all when he played in like the against the Korean contenders teams. But over time, the more he played with them, and the more he enjoyed it, like they were doing well. So I think now that he's on a full Korean team, um, they might do better because they have a player that actually benefits from it, whereas maybe other Koreans won't benefit as much as like someone like Fate will. So I think overall they benefit, and especially since they got rid of they got to sell or trade or whatever some of their academy players they were going to drop
Yeah.
anyways. I think overall Mayhem wins the trade 100% of the time. I think Shax is good. Um, and yeah, I don't know. I think Shax is good. I think when I tried out with him, all the times he like carried on Tracer. So I think if they're building for a 2v2 meta in the future or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
Shax would definitely be pretty prevalent.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess overall they're in the right mindset of building for the future. Not trying to pick up like specifically a Zarya player or something like that. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they're overall doing the right things, I suppose.
Yeah.
But still, Mayhem wins out in the trade. I think.
Yeah, yeah. I think what you're saying in terms of Shax, I think that's 100% right. I think he also has a bit of an underrated hero pool, and I think he really thrives in a 2-2 meta because, yeah, he is a star Tracer and Widow player, but he can also play McCree, and he is primarily a hit scan, but he's the type of hit scan who can flex on a couple of other picks. He has a Doomfist, he has a Pharah. He doesn't really have a Genji, but he can flex on a couple of projectiles, which I think that's what you need if you want to have a permanent starter, so that maybe the other sort of your DPS partner can kind of just play to his strengths and then you can adjust to him. And I think Shax sort of brings that. He's not one or two trick, and in that sense, I
Yeah.
think he's a good pickup for the future. But yeah, like I said, when you acquire a player who Fate hasn't played it like a superstar this season, but is kind of a superstar on paper, I think anytime you trade for a player like that, the team that is losing that player is always just getting kind of cents on the dollar, sort of the same way as we were talking about in the NBA. You give up one of the best players, you're just gonna look to add pieces and try to rebuild, but you're not really gonna get the same like an equivalent return, I guess. Or
Yeah.
it's at least it's very rare to find these mutually beneficial trades that are going to make both teams better. It's very rare to find that.
Well, it's weird. Like, if you compare, let's think about like remember the trade rumor where like they were gonna trade to
Mhm.
Boston or whatever.
Mhm.
Do you think so? In that situation, if they traded Fusions, what was the trade gonna be?
It was
Was that
fusions and
leaked?
it was fusions and asking for KSF and Fate.
Fusions for KSF and Fate. Well, who do you think would have won out in that situation? You think it still would have been Boston, or do you think he would have been upset because he's still not on a full Korean roster?
Mm.
It's
I
like,
think on
I guess,
paper, yeah, I think on paper, definitely Boston wins that trade. I think, especially since that trade would have happened at a time, I think, where Fusion's value was at its peak. I don't think his value is the same now than it was 1.5 months ago. He came in, he made an impact, he was vocal leader, which I think inflated his value a ton. And I think he is a very solid Reinhardt. He's obviously a very consistent shot caller. He has a lot of intangible qualities, and he's still young. So he's a pretty good Western main tank to build around, considering there aren't many Western main tanks in the league who are actually competitive. But I also think again, his value was a little inflated. I think Fate is a better player overall, especially considering the entirety of the map pool. I think Fusions has looked more lost on Winston, whereas that's the strength of Fate. So I think both in terms of the tank swap and the DPS swap, I think KSF is a significantly better player than Asking as well. So I think actually I don't know how much cash would have potentially exchanged hands in that type of a trade, but I feel like that trade would have been potentially worse um for the Valley. I think they would have gotten a main tank that's younger, that's nice to build around, but they would have missed out, I think, on a much better DPS Ascend and Prospect and Shax.
Yeah, yeah. I think. I mean, I think I agree with you. Like for the future, I think it like benefits bot or benefits um Valiant still with the current trade they got.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if they're building for goats, I think Valiant would probably
Yeah.
win that. Like I
Yeah.
probably to like it's probably kind of polarizing, I guess, because like I think that Fusions, if like maybe instead of asking if they got Blase or something like that with
Mm-hmm.
the trade, they'd have like a really good Brig player and
Yep.
they'd have like a really good main tank player. Um, so I don't know. I don't know who pulled out of that deal really in that situation.
Mm.
Uh, but I think Valiant might have actually done well because like to, personally I rate Fusions really highly.
Yep.
Um, I think he's a really good player. It's nice to have a very vocal
Yeah.
main tank.
Yep.
Um, and I think before I played in like even ranked with Fusions or something like that, I maybe like underrated it a little bit because I thought it was like maybe he talks too much or something like that. But like realistically, when you play with him, like you understand why he talks so much, and that like overall it's like really beneficial because it helps your flex support a lot, and
Yep.
just overall that just like gives the team a big benefit. So I think
Yep.
Fusions is definitely personally I really rate him highly.
Yep.
So
No, for sure. For
I
sure, I
don't know.
think for sure. I think they would have done better in this
Yeah.
meta in the next stage. And I do agree. Like as a coach as well, I love guys who are calming consistently. Like it doesn't matter if you lose, if you win. Like from what I see in that guy, he communicates consistently all the time, regardless of situation. And if you have that, that's an intangible quality that is just so hard to find, especially in a main tank guy who just doesn't get flustered and calls, especially at a young age. So I agree. Like in terms of Western main tanks, there aren't many. There's Muma, there's Super, and there's Fusions, right? And I think there's those guys hold a ton of value because of how rare Western main tanks are. Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of weird because like also on top of that. No, by the way,
you're
I think
lagging
I'm
a little
lagging.
bit. Yeah.
All right. Am I good
Okay.
now?
Yeah, you can restart. Let's go.
All right. Well, I don't know. Like, yeah, like all these main tanks, and especially in the West, are like very rare. But I think at the same time, if you like even look out to people that don't play that much or whatever, like we have Gator on
Mm-hmm.
like in our 2-way
Yeah.
contract. Like Gator is really good, especially in NA contenders. I think maybe I got too much credit in
Yeah.
comparison to Gator. Like Gator was already an L, so I guess it wasn't like that big of a deal for
Mm-hmm.
him. I don't know. I think Gator is definitely one of the best NA main tanks, and maybe he probably will get a shout for Team US. Super is really good too. So
Yeah.
Gator has some tough competition, and the fact that he hasn't played for half a year now is kind of feels bad, man, for him.
Yeah.
But you
Yeah.
never know. I think Gator's also really good, and time will tell if it's proven or not, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, it is rare. It's kind of a rare commodity, and kind of if you can find the right guy and really foster that talent, I think you see someone like Super who is, I think, in this meta at least the best main tank in the league, especially on Ryan. I think there's maybe he still has something to prove on Winston, but at least on Ryan, I think he's just phenomenal, as is the rest of the Shock. But and then he's kind of a face outwards as well. He's way more marketable than most other players, so I think he just has a ton of value as a player. And if you can find that in a Western player, in Gator, in Fusions, and Muma, in all of these guys, I think there's a ton of value. And in the midst of all that, you also mentioned World Cup, so I guess that's kind of an interesting thing. Obviously it's still far off, but are you gonna try to make the team as well, Team USA? And what do you think about your chances and your competition?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'd love to get on Team USA. I don't know how likely it is. I mean, it's just like anything else. Like with my view on getting an Overwatch League, I think I'm more focused on myself and trying to be the best player I can be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think there's some tough competition in the Flex Pro role. I mean, there's Raucus, there's Sleepy's really good. Um, there's like other players like Goliath and Haku, some tier 2 players that are really good. So it'd definitely be hard to make Team USA. Um, but I think regardless, Team USA or not, or if I got on Team USA, I think I'd be more focused on the long term goal. Anyways, is just kind of beating teams like Team UK or Team Korea stuff like this in World Cup first before anything else, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I hope I make Team USA, but my life's not on the line if I do or do
Mm-hmm.
not. So
Do you think Team
hopefully,
US? Do you think Team USA
okay.
can? Sorry for interrupting. Do you think Team USA can build a roster that can beat Korea this year?
Yeah, I think for sure. I think every year they have the opportunity to. It's just it's difficult because like the meta can change on you,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't know how to react. I think even like Team USA had freaking Sinatra on Brig, man. They had Sinatra on Brig in Goat or something like that. So like I don't know. As soon as you make questionable decisions like that, I think it's kind of like over for Team USA. Like you need to be sure 100% of the time every time. It's like and it's like hard to be sure at the same time. So like you can give them some slack. But it's like if a 2-2-2 meta happens, like you need to be prepared for that. You need to be prepared for also a goats meta in case that's still around. So it's just like important to always be flexible. And obviously, if Team USA doesn't do well, that blame will fall on somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and some of the times it's the player, some of the time it's coach, and I guess we'll see what happens.
Mm-hmm. So
But
but
I think this year we have a chance.
But you said wasn't Sinatra on Zarya? Because he said he was on break. Do you mean like initially in sort of the practice leading up to it, and then he swapped to Zarya? Because I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure he was on Zarya in the playoffs.
yeah. I think I just remember him playing Brig in I don't remember when. I saw him on Brig on like Ilios. Was he really not on Brig? Shoot, man.
I'm pretty sure he
I
was
feel
on
like
Zarya. And then
I
people
feel like
were
at some
kind of,
point he was on Brig.
and then people, I do believe that people were flaming him for his Zarya, like, oh, he's just kind of feeding, and then he goes on and
Oh, really?
becomes the best Zarya, because like the team I think just didn't have that much synergy, and then he goes on to being the best Zarya in Al, which is like a little ironic, but I'm almost certain that he was on Zarya, and then I think Hydration was on Brig.
Okay. Well, in that regard, then I guess if he wasn't on Brig,
Yeah.
I think for the most part, like to switch the narrative, I think for the like he is like has been a good Zarya and like already was a really good Zarya.
Mm-hmm.
But I think people tend to hold like I guess like hold Western players to like a weird like accountability, I guess, or something like that, or like they tend to not like give credit where credit's due all the time if a team's not doing well or if a player's still in development or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like they think like, oh, if a player's bad, he can never be good or
Yeah.
something like that. And like for the most part, especially with young players, that's not the case. So like, I don't know. I think Sinatra already showed like signs of brilliance early on, anyways. Um, it's just people tend to like hate on Western players a lot. For obviously right reasons. I mean, like for the most part, we haven't had much success against like Korean players as a whole. So it kind of makes sense. There's some, reasoning behind it, behind the criticism.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but at the same time, you can't be like totally shocked when Western players as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think with Team USA last World Cup, it was just kind of, I don't think they maybe had as many reps on goats as other teams, because I remember when Team Sweden kind of scrimmed them in the summer. So this was before the playoffs, before they lost to the UK, and kind of before the group stages. And if I remember correctly, there were a lot of scrims where we played against USA and they wouldn't be playing goats. Even if we were playing goats, they would be playing like Doomfist Pharah comps to counter. I think with Sinatra on the Doom and Hydration on the Pharah. And they obviously had a lot of success at that point because like we weren't as good on goats as maybe some of the other teams, especially UK who progressed. But a team like UK, a team like France, they only played goats for the entirety of the time. So I think they had probably maybe 30, 40, maybe 50 hours of more experience than
Yeah.
Team USA heading into the playoffs. And I think that kind of adds up in terms of your fundamentals, in terms of being solid, in terms of the teamwork. Like we just talked about how many little things go into making a GOATS team work, that just switching out one player kind of throws everything off. So, yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's important to like be flexible and like to not to be able to change when somebody's playing better than you, or like when it's not playing better than you, to just change when somebody's doing something like a strategy better than you or something like that.
Yeah.
Like,
oh, we think you're cutting out again.
Especially like
Yeah,
that's
you're
the
cutting out
biggest
a bit.
thing. That's the biggest like USA again. I don't know. Wait till I.
Yeah.
All right. Let me know when I'm good.
Yeah,
Am I good?
I think you're good now, and you have to roll back like 3
Okay.
sentences maybe.
Yeah. I can see whenever it cuts out.
Yeah.
So
Oh, now it's cutting out again.
Keep that in mind. It's getting worse.
It's getting
All right, we're good. We're back.
We're on a lifeline here. We're on one red stick.
It caught up. It went up to like 4 kms or something like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think it's important for Team USA to be like flexible. That's like the biggest thing. Like for instance, when I was on Atlanta Academy and we scrimmed Envy and they were playing goats this was like the first time we played goats, and we just got absolutely like crushed. And we were like, oh man, are we just playing bad? Are we not countering it well? And I think a lot of the time that might be like due to like a coach's ego or something like that you don't swap. Maybe ego or arrow or ego, whatever you want to call him. Maybe he thought that like they weren't playing it well enough to counter goats or something like that, so they never swapped for the longest time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's like on a coach to put aside that ego, or like on the team to do like as a whole decide to not run the same stupid shit over and over again, right? You have to change to whatever the best thing is. And at the time it was goats, and they just didn't adapt fast enough. Yeah. So I think that's just going to be the biggest factor. And I mean, I guess any World Cup team is to not, and that's maybe why like Team UK like did so well, is because they can like change so quickly. Like they don't have an ego to put aside, and hopefully Team USA this year puts that aside and thinks of the greater good.
Yeah. I mean, at the same time, it's I think also it was very easy for them to kind of talk themselves into that they were doing the right thing, because playing those compositions, they didn't have any trouble against the teams they were scrimming against. They weren't really scrimming against the best teams. I guess the best team they potentially could have scrimming against was Canada and us, and they didn't, I guess, have any trouble with that with their comps. And I think they actually went, and I think they had a very easy stage in terms of qualifying for the World Cup, and they played kind of their own stuff and managed to get through, with a breeze. So I think it's kind of easy to look at the short term at the like, this is working. We have the counter to goats. These guys are going to have to adapt to us, and then if they adapt to us, well, then we're going to have that hour edge in terms of the hours that we put into these compositions. So you kind of, I guess never know. They didn't really appreciate, so I suppose, the strength of goats, and maybe didn't invest as many hours. But who knows? But yeah, I do think like this year, potentially USA could make a run. I think a lot of the players really developed. Super Sinatra, those guys were very young last year, and now they're veterans. They've won stage championships, so I think they're USA is going to be in a good spot heading into this year. But
yeah. We'll have to see.
Yeah. And I think, that's a good way to wrap up. We've been going on for a very long time. So do you have anything, any closing words, anything you want to shout out? Any shout outs to the fans?
Yeah, shout outs to the fans. Thanks for watching, guys. What is it? I know I have this black screen up that you can't see, but shout out to Cox, because usually, it'd be nice to have our sponsorship more readily available. But yeah, thanks for having me, Minnow. Shout out to you. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks a lot. Thanks for agreeing to coming on, Dogman. It was a pleasure as always. And for the listeners, if you want to check out the VOD, you can obviously do that on YouTube, and the podcast is also on Spotify. It's on Google Podcasts. It's on like 5 different platforms that I remember that I've never heard of, but that got automatically put on there. So basically, go to your favorite platform, search for Tempo Shift, and there's a pretty good chance you might find it there. And yeah, thanks for listening.